Mr. Werfel, keeping taxpayer information secure is vital to protect taxpayer privacy, deter fraud, and identity theft, but it's also the law. Leaks of taxpayer information are referred to TIGTA, of course, which investigates each case and then determines whether to refer that case to the Department of Justice for prosecution. Now, back in August, you assured the committee that the Obamacare Data Hub would be very secure in securely conveying taxpayer information. Now, you said the IRS already transmits taxpayer data, and of 8 million transactions that happened in 2012, there were only 24 improper disclosures of taxpayer information. Now, committee staff spoke with TIGTA to verify the number that you provided, the 24 number, and TIGTA says that in 2012, there were actually not 24, but 200 different leaks of taxpayer information reported to TIGTA. Where did you get your information on the 24 number? Because even TIGTA does not know where that number came from. In fact, just during the course of the last few months, my understanding is that the committee has made you aware of at least 8 unauthorized disclosures of confidential taxpayer information. So how can groups such as the National Organization for Marriage, of course, which has come up in this hearing after hearing here in this part of the investigation, whose donor information was actually leaked, have any confidence that the IRS is going to safeguard that confidential information from public disclosure?
Well, first of all, separating out any specific taxpayer to make sure that I'm clear of any 6103 issues and lifting the question up more generally. Let me start with the data discrepancy. I would love to meet with TIGTA and understand, make sure that we're making the same assumptions. My numbers, I think, were reflecting any data breaches that might have happened by state and local governments that are receiving information. For example, in Medicaid, they might have a broader definition of what they're talking about in terms of capturing the 200 versus the 28. So I will work with TIGTA, and we will get back to you on a particular reconciliation of those numbers. The process is extremely robust, but not absolutely risk-free. And we are required under the law, again, this goes to the IRS's responsibility to administer the tax code, to furnish this information to effectively run programs such as Medicaid and now the Affordable Care Act. And we have a very robust plan and action that we go through to validate the security of that data as it leaves the IRS, and in the case of the Affordable Care Act, as it travels through HHS into the exchanges. And as we get closer to October 1st, we are working extremely diligently with HHS, with the exchanges, to make sure that all those protocols around IT and data security are in place. And they're extremely robust. They're not absolutely risk-free, unfortunately. I wish they could be, because any breach of sensitive taxpayer information is enormously troubling and should have consequences. Sometimes it's inadvertent, and the consequences are on the IRS to relook at our controls and safeguards and update them. Sometimes it's advertent, and in those cases, we refer those to the Justice Department.
Let me ask you another question. To dispel any accusations of wrongdoing, your agency released the names of dozens of different targeted groups that had been since approved. However, our investigation has found out that of these groups, 83% of those that were flagged for the IRS surveillance program described by Chairman Bustani earlier just happened to be right-leaning. And now you've told us that the surveillance program has been suspended for these organizations. So the suspension of the program, as well as the numbers, certainly seem to suggest that extra scrutiny was somehow inappropriate in the first place. So, Mr. Werfel, were agents under instruction to flag right-leaning groups for surveillance?
I'm not aware of any such evidence of that. The reason why we suspended it was out of an abundance of caution. I sent a new leadership team in there, and I said, I want you to make sure that you're comfortable that not only is the process as efficient as it needs to be, not only is it efficient and meeting the demands of the law, but that all the appropriate safeguards are in place. Whether it was mentioned in the TIGTA report or not, I wanted a comprehensive review of all appropriate safeguards. So out of an abundance of caution, not because there was particular evidence, we suspended activities until my new leadership team in there could get comfortable that all the process and safeguards are effective. And it's not going to be forever. We're working very hard to make sure that those confirmations can be done quickly so we can restart this process, because exams is a critical part of what we do in order to enforce the tax code.
Are you aware, or did anyone inappropriately influence the selection of these groups for surveillance?
Again, I struggle with the word surveillance. I mean, in terms of referral to the RU, if that's what you mean, I'm not aware of it.
Let me just ask you this, too. Did Lois Lerner have a role in the way that these groups were flagged or processed?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that she did, but specifically, but I will say this. The director of the exempt organization unit has responsibility for overseeing the operations. This is one of the operations. I could talk to you about what I think are the appropriate types of overview that individuals should have, and that appropriate is making sure that they're doing what I'm doing, making sure we have the right leadership team in place, putting in the right processes, the right safeguards. But to the extent it ever would bleed into a specific direction that this entity that the process said should be audited, going in and changing that conclusion, to me that would breach inappropriate behavior.
And Mr. Werfel, I know we're running out of time, but you mentioned earlier that Lois Lerner is still on paid leave. How long do you expect that she will be on paid leave? Have you asked her to resign?
So let me do two things with that question. First of all, let me articulate that I can, under the constraints of the Privacy Act, I can give an employee's status, but I can't go beyond that. But what I can do is lift up out of Ms. Lerner and talk generally about our process. And what our process is that I committed to running a process to ensure that there's accountability for any individuals who can no longer hold the public trust because of certain responsibilities they had in the findings of the TIGTA report. That process involves, I put together an accountability review board, which is looking at all the documents, all the issues, and understanding what different managers or leaders, what responsibilities they had. That process is going through and looking at all those documents and doing those inquiries. It takes time. I'm as frustrated as anyone. I want the process to go quick. But as we described, there's 400,000 pages of documents, so it's not something that can happen overnight. What I will say is this. We are making progress. We're closer to the finish line than we are the starting line in terms of running through this process. And I expect that in the near term, we'll start seeing conclusions coming out of these processes.
And Mr. Chairman, as you know, I mean, Lois Lerner is the one person who knows the most, who can answer the most, and who has refused to testify.